put the battery in. This is sweet. Building motorcycles for a living is pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's something you don't want. Welcome to another edition of Saturday Sportster. So I want to get the distributor really close before I put the carburetor on, because I won't be able to actually pull the distributor out once the carburetor is installed on the motorcycle. The orientation is important because I want the wire coming out the back, because it's going to tie in to the fuel line to get to the coil. This is a important location for where this distributor is going to be clocked, because you essentially can spin this all the way around to get the timing marks to line up where you want it to. I want to do that with the notch pointing towards into the motor, so my wire can route in a way that I want it to go. So first we need to get the motor to top dead center, and if you follow along with the book, it's really simple. Taking out your timing plug, pull out your plugs, rotate it over. You can do it, since this is an early bike, you can do it with the kicker arm, or you could put it in fourth gear and actually roll the wheel. If you're by yourself, I would maybe suggest using a jack and rolling the wheel, because the timing mark is actually on the opposite side of your motor than your kicker arm. It'll be a little bit harder for you to do, but from the left side of the bike, you'll be able to put the bike in fourth gear and then have the wheel off the ground and actually roll it to line up the mark. But the first thing we need to do is to get the front cylinder on the compression stroke, so that we're just in front of where the advanced timing mark is going to come into the window on the case. So we're going to go to the other side of the bike to start this out. So right under your VIN is going to be this plug, and that's the timing window for the timing mark to be visible from. And it's just a plug to close up that hole when you're not timing your bike. This is where the timing mark is going to be visible at. So to get the mark in the window in the right location, we need to first make sure that we're on the compression stroke of the front cylinder. And to make this easier, we're going to pull the plugs out. You're going to pull the plugs out of both sides. My hand over the spark plug hole, and we're just going to turn the motor over so you can see the air compressing to blow off my thumb. I'm not sucking it in. So we want to be on the compression stroke, so the next time that blows my finger off. Okay, so let's blow my finger off. So we're on the compression stroke. And like I said, I'm just putting this into fourth gear because it'll be easy to turn. Now we're going to go to this side. And I'm looking in the window. We got on the compression stroke. Just ever so slowly. There it is. And you just want to put that right in the center of the window. So this is your distributor. If you're more familiar with like newer bikes with an electronic ignition, this is the old version of that, and what used to actually make the spark on your old motorcycle. And more people might be more familiar with a distributor that stays on your car, and it works pretty much the same. Instead of the pickups being on the perimeter of the cap, like if you take off the cap off your car, like if you have a V6 or something, and there's a bunch of little pickups around the perimeter, the pickup is actually on the inside, and instead of the pickup just rotating and making contact, this cam actually rotates and it pushes the points over, and that's what creates your spark. So it's just an old style, but it works the same, and this style actually times is exactly the same as if you had a Dyna S. There's only one more additional step, as you have to make the gap between the breaker points to the specified, they have it as 20 thousandths in the book. So we're going to set this up, get this all really close, and then I'm going to check my point gap. You have to check the point gap at the marked lobe of the cam, so that it has a mark here. So this is where they want you to time it to this mark on the cam follower with the points breaking. And so we're going to set that up and get that close. So when you drop this in, since it's got a helical gear on it, this is actually going to cause this to rotate. So after you put this in, you're able to rotate this around, but this will actually be fixed as far as top dead center. So you'll only be rotating the housing. To change where that's going to line up at, you'll have to actually take this out and then jog it over a tooth to rotate it a little bit. So it can be a little bit of trial and error to get this to line up in the orientation that I want it to be with the motor timed properly. So we're going to try to fit this in here because I can't actually see where that tooth is to even prep this, so you kind of have to just like jiggle it into place. And see how it's automatically just rotating? You can kind of see that. I think that puts us pretty close. There we go, and it dropped down in there. Okay. So as you can see, the circuit breaker slid on with the notch in the back, and I kind of ran the wire, and I left it a little long for now. I might trim it, but right now it looks okay running around the back, and then it connects in that fork right here in the back, the same spot that the condenser bolts onto the body of the circuit breaker. And so to start off, we need to adjust our point gap so that it says in the book that it should be at 20 thousandths. So what you want is to grab your feeler gauge, and this is the adjustment for the breaker points. And this plate, this is a lock screw right here where the screwdriver is going to, and then this is an eccentric adjuster. So when you turn this screw, it actually will push this plate either further away from the points or closer to it, where the other side of your contact is going to make connection. And when it opens is when it sends the spark to the coil. So you want it to open a maximum of 20 thousandths. The book says, a lot of them say to time it to where the follower cam is right here on the arrow of the cam, but it also says in the book to time it where the maximum opening is 20 thousandths. So I have my feeler gauge to 20 thousandths, and then I'm going to follow the cam and make sure, here, I already did this, but I want to show you how to do it. So, okay, you just have to loosen it up a little bit because you can see, watch. See how it closed that? And then the other way it's open, it's huge now. So we'll put it about to there. And then we kind of have to try to find the largest spot on this cam. And it doesn't matter that this is rotating, you're just looking at this spot with the follower cam going on this part of the cam. So we want to see where that's opening up the most. And it looks like about there. That should be on the tallest part of the cam. And right there, we want to see how I'm adjusting this. It's opening and closing it. So I have slight tension on this side, just so it'll slide nice, but it also keeps this plate pretty flat to the top of the housing. Because you don't want to set the point gap and then you tighten it up and this all flexes and changes the gap position there. So see how it's loose? How this slides really loosely in between here? You want it to be just a slight drag. This is hard to convey in a video, but you want it to be a real slight drag and then tighten it up there. Okay, that rotated. Yeah, that feels really good. And then just make sure it doesn't get bigger anywhere. Okay, and we have our motor at top dead center, so now we got to time this. So I hooked up a test light to the negative side of the coil, not the side with the power coming in, because that side's always going to be hot. So I hooked it up to the same side as this wire here. And so you could potentially just clip it there because that would be the same thing as the coil, but hooking it up to the coil is out of the way. So I'm just going to put this somewhere where I can see it, that it's nice and close to where I'm working, so I can instantly see when this opens up. I'm going to hold the weights open so the timing is fully advanced, because that's where I want to time it to. And then this is going to get rotated. Oh, I have to have the key on. This is going to get rotated until that comes on. As you can see, I'm holding the distributor housing, and we timed this distributor to the fully advanced by holding the weights open, and then just to check, I want to actually hold the housing and then turn the weights so they open, so you turn them clockwise. And you can see as soon as, it's more of a feel, because I can feel when it stops. As I feel the cam stop and hit where the weights are maximum all the way open, you can see the light come on. Do that again. So you want it to be right as it touches, and then the light comes on. So we're going to actually lock it down there. And that's going to be where we're going to lock our timing down. And this is setting our timing up. Now we can put the cap on, and this is done. I have to kind of try to fish in the back to get this screw in the back. A little tricky. So I took the motor mount off just to give me a little bit more space. I had to just kind of slip the key out of the motor mount just so I could move. I have the key just kind of tucked up on the top of the front cylinder head, and then I have the motor mount with the coil on it in a Crown Royal bag just hanging over the primary, just to get it a little out of the way, because I do need to install the intake manifold, and the intake manifold has these clamps that run over the side with kind of long studs. And so it'll be tricky to get all this in there with the coil and everything still mounted on your bike. So if you just kind of hang it out of the way for now, this will make this part a lot easier. So to install your intake, I got the rubber band style for early iron head, and I like to just roll these over the edge on both sides, just like that. And I just roll them on. Be a little tough, and I also have the nuts off of the clamps with the studs out of this for now, because we're going to need to slip those over. But so with the rubber bands like this, then you just kind of press it up and they snap right into place. There you go. And see how you can have a nice smooth bevel on both sides, like it's smooth and consistent. The rubber band, everything is pretty much mostly flush between this mating surface, this surface, and that surface. They're not like proud in any which way, and you should be able to let go. And that means you got a good, it's seating in there properly. And then what you need to do is fish these jobbies through, these clamps. You gotta get, it's nice to have a plan of which side you're gonna put the stud on. There you go. And it might be easy if you have another person. So I had to grind a little bit away of this Carb Sport bracket to get it to fit behind this distributor. It's really close inside there to the back of the housing, but now that we have it ground away into where it just clears, I'm going to bolt this on to the bike just at the bottom, and we're going to leave it loose and then just make sure to set to actually look that this is perfectly up and down, and then we're going to bolt our carburetor on. So we got to fish this in, and it goes behind the little wire, and then this tab goes to the back of the intake. And so we're just going to fish this on to the lifter block. All these holes are slotted to help you move this thing around to get it to line up. All right. And see, I just bent it just that slightest bit to try to give me a little bit more height. There we go. So I'm just checking to make sure that it's straight up and down. You could use a level. I can kind of tell. I thought it was going to be going up, but this actually looks really good. You could maybe take some measurements off some flat surfaces. A good thing to check is you could take this cover off and actually put one of those magnets that you see me use, the digital angle finder, right to the sprocket, because that sprocket's going to be vertical. It's a machine surface. So you could put that on there, zero it out, and put it on this and make sure that they're parallel. Would be a good thing to check. The one thing that this is really going to throw off if it's not straight up and down is your float adjustment. So that's a critical thing to make sure that it's right. But this looks really straight. I'm going to go with that, and we're going to put the carburetor on. So we're fitting this together. I'm feeding the bolts in from the back side. I'm using socket head Allens because it'll be easier for you to say if you were going to remove your carburetor later, you might not need to remove the motor mount to get to it because you'll be able to kind of hang them out of the way. And so those will be, you might thank yourself later for putting bolts like that. And also it'll be easier for you to fish them on and off with a socket head bolt. It's just a better bolt to use. And we got our isolator block, and this is going to decrease the heat from the motor getting to the body of the carburetor. So that'll just help keep your carburetor cool to keep it running better. Rubber side in because we have a rubber O-ring on this side of the carburetor, and so we're going to stick that on there and kind of just get the bolts started, and then we're going to go to the other side to tighten it up. This is a S&S Super E. It's a really great, reliable carburetor, super easy to work on, and not much going on. If you don't have a lot of experience with carburetors, this is definitely a good one to go to. There's lots of information on the internet. It comes with a full jet kit if you buy one new that has a full range of jets and the booklet of a description of what type of jet it recommends for the size of motor that you have, and ways for you to test the tuning of your bike to make sure that your jetting is proper for the performance of your motorcycle. There's a reason they've been making them forever. So they're a really great carburetor to run on your bike. So we're going from this side, and I'm just tightening this thing on, so we can just torque it on now. Oh. Just like that, you got a carburetor on your motorcycle. Don't forget to tighten the bolts on the lifter block after you've installed everything, and it's designed to have a little bit of flex, so it gets the tab will pull down in whatever way to get this to sit right. But what you don't want is, it's supposed to be strung this way, so it keeps your carburetor from like twisting or anything like that. Once it's bolted on and everything's tight, it'll keep it from moving and give you a nice sturdy mount for your carburetor. But don't be afraid to maybe bend a little tang or something. It's only 1/8 inch, it should be flexible, but it's just strong enough once it's tight to give you a nice strong mount. Another thing now that we're here that you don't want to forget is it has a little nipple right here. This is like a vacuum line, and you're going to want to plug this because otherwise when you try to pull off the line, it won't be responsive and it might be kind of hard to diagnose. So just make sure not to forget to cap that. So I routed the fuel line to kind of match the coil, just to come down and go between the two cylinders. And since we're rerunning between the two cylinders, I don't want to get vapor lock, so I'm using just a spring to stand it off my cylinders. They have other different kind of things like a braided line or like a plastic sheath that S&S makes to just keep it from the riding directly on the cylinder walls to try to keep your fuel cool and not get vapor lock. So I'm slipping that over the hose, and then I'm gonna run the hose to the fitting and cut it and just tie it on, and then that'll be finished. We can bolt the air cleaner on, and we'll be done with that part. One thing I do wanna check though is I wanna see what jets are in this carburetor because I have no idea. So we get that routed, we get it cut, and we're just gonna slip this on. I have a tool. I don't really really have much to pull on that, so we'll grab these guys. Oh. There we go. Look at that. Okay. I like that. So before I moved on, I wanted to make sure I knew what the jetting was in the carburetor, and then I'm also going to actually swap it out so it's something better to start with. A good tip is to just write what you got right on the side of the float bowl. So say if you forgot later or you're riding and you want to step it up, you don't have to take your bike apart to realize what jets you have in there, so now you can just move on to right to check in to see if you have the right jets or buy new ones. But this kit came with a whole set of jets. It actually says for the displacement for like an e-carburetor what you're going to use. This is a 900, but it's actually an 883. Since this is an 883, this is recommending a 0.0265 to a 0.0268 or a 0.028 intermediate jet to start. This has a 0.0295 stock, so I'm gonna go down to a 0.028 in that, and then the main jet recommends a 0.066, but I have an iron head at home and it's a little richer than quite such a small jet, and so I actually wanna, if I have a 68, I'm gonna step it up to a 68. Just so it's a little rich. I'd rather step down to lean it out than go up to make it richer. It's just, it's better to be on the side of caution as far as being rich. Lean can get scary, especially on a fresh build. You don't want to make it lean. So here's a 68. I'm going to use the 68 main jet. I want to throw that in there, and I think I'll go with the 28 that it recommends as the intermediate jet. This is your main jet. It slips right into the bottom of the emulsion tube, which comes up into the mouth of the carburetor, and that's where the main fits, and they look like just tiny little bolts. Typically, they all look like this, is what the main looks like. The intermediates vary. This is the intermediate jet. Some people call it a slow jet or a pilot jet. S&S calls it an intermediate jet, so that's what we're gonna call it. Like I said, 28, 68. That's what we're running. That's what we're gonna start with. I think that's a safe place to start. Every motor's just a little bit different. Some, I don't know, this is a good place to start, but you might have to jet it. Not every 900 is going to want the same jetting. There's a lot of variations of what can affect what jetting the motorcycle is going to like. Wiggle this all back in there. So along with telling you like a recommended jet size to start with, it also can tell you where the screws should be set at and like where to start out if you're just running the bike for the first time. And so that would be a good thing to follow, say with your mixture screw, and how to set your idle. If you're new to this, that would be very helpful. And you can find everything. They have it on their website, and it's just a good, easy trick to help you tune your S&S properly. We're going to be using the Gasbox Dog Dish air cleaner, and they have a couple different fitments. One's for CV, one's for S&S. I think they might also have an EFI fitment as far as the backing plate goes. You'll have to check that out on the website. This bolts in a certain way. I don't know if you can actually mount this backwards or not. On a S&S, it's pretty obvious in which way it fits, but make sure not to cover up the float bowl vent, because if it plugs up too much, it'll be like holding the top over a straw with water in it. Nothing will come out, so you won't be able to get gas to the motor. So it's really important not to cover up that hole. And they also offer a plug on S&S's. Say if you have a different kind of air cleaner that you're going to actually cover that hole, they have a different way. Like I think the Super Sucker might have a different style of mounting, and you actually take that plug out, so you move where the float bowl vents to, and that'll help your gas flow. But on this one, on the gas box, it's lined up, and they have it already set up in the design to eliminate having to do anything like that. This is all held on with Phillips head, so you only need one tool. to be able to remove your air cleaner from your carburetor to do any kind of service work that you need, which is really helpful. You don't have to pull out a bunch of stuff. Say if you only wanted to see if your accelerator pump's working or something like that. And these are really great. They're made right here in Cleveland, Ohio, made locally. CNC spun aluminum. They have a nice vintage look and they're relatively small, give you a nice look for your old vintage bike. Some of the other stuff just might look a little too modern on this bike. I had a different air cleaner that I was thinking about using and I put it on there and it just really stood out, and I didn't want the air cleaner to be such a focal point of this motorcycle. So I went with just a classic look of just being like a round spun polished air cleaner. So what's left is I got to fit the exhaust and we got the clutch and the throttle cable and put some oil places. We're getting really close. So now we're going to start fitting up the exhaust. And I need to get stuff a little out of the way. We're going to start with the front pipe. Wiggle that on there. Okay, now I'm going to get this. There we go. Get this one. Tighten up this one so we can work on fitting up the rest. Okay, I got this bolt. I just loosened up the motor mount and I'm just putting it back now. But with these on there, you won't be able to fall off. Okay. So we got a little tab and slot style with little carriage bolts. So I'm fitting this up just the same as before. Checking my clearances and making sure I don't make anything too tight. You don't want to smack anything. Get everything on there, but I'm going to leave it a little loose until we have both pipes on here, just so I can wiggle this thing around and get them to line up nicely, because we did add it to where they have a little bit of play in the mounts. So as you can see, we got one of the pipes on and I forgot that I didn't put the clutch cable on first, so I really just wanted to jump ahead and put the clutch cable on before I get any further, so I don't have to take any of this apart to be able to get like the covers off and stuff like that. So it bolts on just like before. Say if you have any other 69, you're going to slip it into the cam cover at the bottom, and then it goes to the handlebar at the top. And 69s are a little different, like any early Sportster. The clutch adjustment is on the right side, and you got your push rod coming through your counter shaft. The actuator for the clutch is actually on the back side of the cover, and this can be a little bit of a pain in the butt to fit in here. I would recommend trying to do it off the bike and maybe just out of the way so you can get maximum amount of the cable to get in there. So when you get in this tight area, I don't know, it might be easier. Say I should have done it before the foot peg was on and stuff like that, but I'm going to try to fish this on here without having to take the thing more apart. So you're going to have to hold this forward, and you also have to get the ball to clear, and then push this in here. It's real tight. Oh, I almost got it. It's almost there. Little screwdriver. Just jam it in there. Things to pop on, and it's going to be popping off. Oh. Oh. So I got the clutch cable in the cover and the cover bolted back on, and fitting the clutch cable into that actuating like worm gear can be very tricky. So it might be easier for you to try it off the bike a couple times just with the cable loose and the cover in your hand, so you can get the maximum play out of the cable and you're not fighting anything else. Because just to see where the end ferrule of the cable snaps into those two hooks on the worm gear, just so you know how you got to hold it, because that's also got the spring on it that you have to hold tension on to get at the right angle. It's just kind of tricky. So just try it on the bike a couple times, or off the bike a couple times, like sitting down where you're comfortable, just so you know exactly what angle that thing's going to snap into, and maybe get a couple tricks on how to fit that together, because it is kind of tricky. So now after this, we're just going to fit the cable in the handlebar before we adjust the clutch. So we're going to do that now. So these pieces are just like the little bushings for your ferrule to ride in. And so don't put them on the top. You see a lot of bikes like this, and these are eventually going to fall out because when you have your ferrule in there, there's nothing to hold it in. So they'll stay in there for a little while, but there's nothing really holding them, so eventually they're just going to fall out. So the right way to do this, it's a little trickier, it takes a little bit more time, but it's the right way to do it. So do it this way. You're going to slip them in. And slip it in just like that. Like I said, this can be a little trickier, but now they hit the inside of the flange, and then with the cable in here, there's no way for these things to pop out. So, and then this is the end that the cable slides into, and then it pulls backwards. So I'm going to put it this way so I can put the cable through and pull it and snap it in. If I were to put it this way, it would be really complicated. Like, yeah, it's nice you can't see the cable, but whatever, I'd rather make it easier on myself. So I'm going to put it in this way. And you're going to want to need a little screwdriver to keep the bushings pushed up. Okay, yeah, this part can be a little tricky. So now we got the cable, and we're fighting the spring a little bit. So I'm going to try to snap that in there. Look at that. Ah, there we go. Okay, now we have to adjust the clutch before we take the play out of it. So now that that's hooked up, we can adjust the clutch on the cover. So the book says it can be a little bit confusing on how to adjust the clutch on this style of like the early Sportster setup. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing to adjust this. So I have it just the same. I took a little bit out of the cable just so the cable's returning to slight put pressure on that spring. And I had the adjustment all the way out. And then I'm running this screw in until it just kind of touches. And then we're going to lock it down there. And then I'm going to check the clutch with it on the road. Because for whatever reason, what it's saying in the book isn't making a whole lot of sense, but we'll be able to tell right away whether the clutch is slipping or whether it's dragging. So I'm going to do that on the road, and I think it's going to be good for now. I think I have plenty of throw in the lever from where it's at, and it doesn't have any tension on the clutch, so I can't see that it's going to make it slip. So I guess the only thing is if it might not be disengaging it enough, and it might shift hard. So if it does that, we're going to adjust it again. But it feels pretty good. I think it's going to be fine. So we got the clutch cable on there, and now we just have to lock down the adjustment. So I got the throttle cable on, and it's pretty straightforward. You hook up one side to the housing, use a little ferrule on the ball to snap in over the hooks of the throttle tube, and then just route it. You might need to pick between the small or short tower to go to your carburetor depending on the year throttle cable that you get, and sometimes you might just get a random year. So it's nice to have, if you're running S&S, to have the short and long towers handy, because I've gotten mixed matched ones from, say, your local parts store or something like that. So it's nice to have. And then also, when you're putting your throttle cable on, it's much better to route it inside your frame just so it's nice and tucked in, instead of routing it straight from your handlebar to your carburetor, because for one, it looks better. Two, for safety, because you can rev up your bike just by grabbing this and pulling it. It'll eventually pull the tension out of the thing, and it'll open up the butterfly on your carburetor. So for one, it looks better. Two, it's just not safe if you have it on there. You could get hooked on something as you're riding. If you're like a lane splitter or something, you get that thing caught on a mirror, and now your bike's just wide open. So tuck this thing in, looks better, safer, it's just better all around. It just bolts up, huh? Oh shit, that's pretty sweet. I like that a lot. So the last thing that needs to go in, we just got to put the battery on and hook it up, and that'll be the last part to actually hang on the bike, and then everything else is just kind of like first start prep. Say like the putting in the fork oil, putting in the engine oil, we have primary oil to do. I clearly got to get gasoline. I made a list of other things to check before we can fire it up, but it's pretty short and we're gonna have this thing started in no time. So we've hung all the parts on here. There's nothing missing. I've said before, the only thing that we really need to do is just put oil and gas in it and just like fork oil, all that kind of like little stuff, but just really needs liquids. But all the parts are hung on there. This is the first time that I've seen it with the paint polish, everything on here, and it just, man, it looks great. I can't be happier with how this bike came out. Angel Just Joe really killed it on the paint. The polisher did a great job on the pipes and odds and ends that they polished. Man, it turned out really great. I'm very excited to ride this thing down the street.